Please, don't leave me here, the alien girl begged the scarred rancher. What he did next shocked the town. The frontier town of Black Hollow always smelled like dust, whiskey, and tired horses. By sunset, the market street was crowded enough to choke the air itself. Traders shouted over one another beside crooked wooden stalls, while wagon wheels groaned through muddy ruts hardened by weeks without rain. Lanterns flickered beneath porches. Smoke drifted from iron chimneys. Somewhere farther down the street, a piano played badly behind swinging saloon doors while drunken laughter spilled into the evening wind. And in the center of it all stood the girl nobody wanted. She was tied beside a weathered auction post near the livestock pens, wrists bound with rough rope that had already rubbed her violet skin raw. A faded wooden sign hung above her head. Unstable. Dangerous. No refund. People gathered around only long enough to stare. Then they walked away. The alien girl lowered her eyes each time someone laughed. Tiny silver-white markings glowed faintly across her skin like scattered stars beneath water. Long pale hair fell in tangled waves around her thin shoulders, partly hiding the pointed shape of her ears. Her torn gray dress clung to bruised knees and trembling arms. Dust covered her bare feet. She looked no older than 20, and she looked exhausted. "Look at them eyes," one ranch hand muttered nearby. "Ain't natural." "She's cursed," another whispered. "Family up north bought one of her kind 2 years back. Whole ranch burned down." A woman spat into the dirt. "Should have left those creatures buried wherever they came from." The old seller heard the comments and grinned through yellow teeth. He wore a black frontier coat shiny with grease and years of sweat. One hand rested possessively on the alien girl's shoulder while the other clutched a small sack of coins. "Now hold on," he barked loudly. "She ain't all trouble. Cook's decent enough. Strong too. Don't eat much neither." Nobody answered. The girl kept her gaze lowered. The seller's smile slowly faded. By now he had tried all afternoon to sell her. No buyers. No offers. Not even the cruel men lingering near the saloons wanted her. One drunk cowboy stepped closer just to inspect her glowing skin before chuckling darkly. "Ugly little thing." The alien girl flinched quietly. Another man grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her face upward toward the crowd. Silver tears shimmered beneath her eyes. "She crying?" the cowboy laughed. "Maybe it understands us after all." The crowd snickered. The seller shoved the man away before he damaged what little value she still had. Either buy her or move on. But nobody bought her. As twilight deepened, the market slowly began thinning out. Merchants packed crates into wagons while lantern lights spread across the muddy street in long golden streaks. Horses snorted clouds into the cooling air. The alien girl stared toward the western horizon where the last sunlight bled across distant hills. For a moment, she looked less like a strange creature, and more like someone waiting for hope that had already passed her by. Then the crowd suddenly shifted. Conversations quieted. Several townsfolk stepped aside almost instinctively. A rider had entered the street. He came through the market slowly atop a dark horse coated in trail dust. Broad shoulders. Black hat pulled low. Weathered gloves gripping worn leather reins. A rifle rested in a saddle scabbard beside him. But it wasn't the weapons people noticed. It was the scars. One long scar crossed the man's jaw like a pale knife wound. Others disappeared beneath the collar of his faded shirt. Even from a distance, there was something cold and dangerous about him. The kind of stillness men carried after surviving too many terrible things. The rancher dismounted near the general store without speaking to anyone. Someone whispered behind the alien girl. "That's Cade Mercer." Another voice answered carefully. "Thought he stopped coming into town. He only comes when winter supplies run low." "Don't look him in the eye." The alien girl lifted her head slightly. The scarred rancher moved through the market with quiet purpose, collecting supplies as though he wished to leave before darkness settled completely. He ignored the stares following him, ignored the whispers, but as he passed the auction post, the alien girl looked directly at him. Something inside her face changed. Not fear. Not panic. Recognition. Like a drowning person spotting land far away. The seller straightened quickly. "Mercer," he called out with forced cheer. "Maybe you need extra hands around that lonely ranch of yours?" Cade Mercer barely glanced his way. "No." His voice was deep and rough from disuse. The seller forced a laugh. "Come on now. Cheap price. Damn near free." Cade kept walking. Panic flickered across the alien girl's face, because she had seen the men watching from farther down the street. 3 riders near the saloon porch. Hard-eyed. Armed. Waiting. The moment the seller failed to move her tonight, those men would take her back. And she knew exactly what happened to girls taken back. Suddenly she lunged forward. Her bound hands caught Cade's wrist before anyone could react. The crowd gasped. The rancher froze instantly. Even the seller looked stunned. The alien girl's fingers trembled against the scarred man's hand. When she spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Please." Tears slid down her cheeks. "Don't leave me here." Silence swallowed the market. The rancher slowly looked down at her. Up close, he noticed things others hadn't cared to see. The bruises beneath the rope. The fingerprints darkening her arms. The fear hidden beneath exhaustion. And beneath all of it, terror. Not the terror of a monster. The terror of prey. The seller recovered first and barked awkward laughter toward the crowd. "See? Damn thing talks pretty too." Nobody laughed this time. The alien girl still held Cade's wrist carefully, as though letting go might kill her. For several long seconds, the scarred rancher said nothing. The entire street seemed to wait. Then Cade's eyes drifted toward the 3 riders near the saloon. They immediately looked away. That was all he needed to understand. His jaw tightened slightly. Without speaking, he reached beneath his coat and pulled out a heavy leather sack. Coins clinked sharply. The seller's eyes widened. Cade tossed the money onto the wooden platform. The sound echoed through the silent market. Gasps spread through the crowd. "You buying her?" the seller stammered. Cade pulled a knife from his belt. The alien girl flinched, but instead of hurting her, he sliced cleanly through the ropes binding her wrist. The fibers dropped into the dirt. Free. The girl stared at her own trembling hands in disbelief. Then Cade looked at her only once and said quietly, "Get on the horse." The entire town watched in stunned silence as the unwanted alien girl climbed shakily onto the scarred rancher's horse behind him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Cade mounted the saddle and turned toward the edge of town. But as they disappeared into the darkening frontier road, one of the armed riders near the saloon stepped from the shadows with a furious expression. His hand rested near his revolver, and his voice came low and dangerous. "She was never supposed to leave alive." Night settled slowly over the frontier plains as Cade Mercer rode away from Black Hollow with the alien girl behind him. The town lights faded first. Then the voices. Then the sound of civilization itself disappeared beneath the endless wind rolling across open land. Only hoofbeats remained. The girl held the back of Cade's coat carefully, almost afraid touching him too firmly might make him change his mind and leave her somewhere along the trail. Her wrists still burned where the ropes had rubbed skin raw. Every bump along the dark road sent pain through her exhausted body. But she said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was safer. Cold air swept across the plains beneath a sky crowded with stars. The farther they rode, the emptier the world became. Vast grasslands stretched endlessly beneath moonlight silver enough to make the earth look frozen. The alien girl glanced behind them more than once, watching, listening, waiting for riders. Cade noticed. "We ain't being followed," he said quietly. His voice surprised her again. Rough, calm, never louder than necessary. "How do you know?" she asked softly. "Because I would have heard them." That answer somehow felt true. Hours later, they stopped beside a narrow river cutting through dark stone hills. Cade dismounted first, tying the horse loosely before kneeling beside the water to fill a canteen. The girl remained frozen in the saddle. Cade glanced up at her. You planning to sleep up there? She hesitated before slowly climbing down. The moment her bare feet touched the cold ground, pain nearly buckled her knees. Cade caught her arm before she could fall completely. For an instant both froze. The alien girl stared at the scars crossing his hand. Old knife wounds. Burn marks. The kind left by hard years and harder men. Yet his grip remained unexpectedly gentle. He released her immediately afterward and walked toward the saddlebags without another word. The girl wrapped her arms around herself against the freezing wind. A few minutes later Cade tossed something toward her. She fumbled awkwardly before catching it. A thick wool coat. His coat. Still warm from his body. You'll freeze otherwise. The alien girl stared down at the heavy fabric quietly. Nobody had given her anything warm in years. Thank you, she whispered. Cade only nodded while building a small fire between scattered rock. Orange flames slowly rose against the darkness. The girl sat carefully near the heat while Cade cooked beans and dried meat inside a black iron pot. The silence between them wasn't cruel silence. It felt unfamiliar instead. Calm. No shouting. No chains. No hands grabbing her. Just crackling firewood and distant coyotes somewhere beyond the hills. When the food was ready, Cade handed her a bowl first. The girl blinked in surprise. You're giving me the larger portion. You need it more. She lowered her eyes quickly. People did not usually notice when she was hungry. For several minutes they ate in silence. Then Cade finally asked, Got a name? The girl hesitated. Lyra. He nodded once. Cade. She almost smiled faintly at that. As if hearing his first name somehow made him less frightening. Wind rustled through the dry grass around them. Lyra studied the scarred rancher quietly across the firelight. Up close, he looked even more worn than she first thought. His face carried the heaviness of someone who hadn't slept peacefully in years. Faint silver lines marked old bullet wounds near his shoulder beneath his shirt collar. There was sadness in him. Deep sadness. The kind people buried so long it became part of their bones. You bought me without asking questions, Lyra said carefully. Cade stared into the flames. Didn't seem like anyone else planned to help. You believed I wasn't dangerous? That cellar was more dangerous than you. The faintest expression touched her face then. Not quite happiness, but close. The fire crackled softly between them. After a while Lyra spoke again, quieter this time. The men back there, she swallowed hard. They weren't traitors. Cade looked up slowly. No, he said. I figured that much. Fear returned to her eyes. They work for people searching the crash sites in the northern desert. Alien ruins. Old technology. Her fingers tightened around the bowl. They keep survivors alive only if we help them find things. And you escaped? Her silence answered him. Cade nodded slowly, understanding enough. He did not force her to explain further. That mattered more than she expected. Later that night, Lyra woke suddenly beneath the stars. For one terrifying second she thought she was back in the trader wagons again. Then she saw the fire. The horse. And Cade sitting awake nearby with a rifle resting across his knees. Keeping watch. Not guarding her. Protecting her. Something inside her chest hurt unexpectedly. By dawn they continued west. The journey lasted 2 more days across harsh frontier country. They crossed dry canyons where vultures circled overhead and climbed through lonely mountain trails dusted with old snow. Along the way Cade remained mostly silent, but small acts slowly chipped away at Lyra's fear. He stopped whenever she grew tired. Shared water without hesitation. And when her feet blistered badly from walking beside steep trails, he lifted her onto the horse without embarrassing her over it. Nobody had treated her kindly in so long that she no longer understood how to respond. On the 3rd evening they finally reached the ranch. Lyra stared speechlessly. The property rested in a quiet valley surrounded by rolling golden hills and dark pine ridges. Windmills turned slowly near a wide wooden barn. Horses grazed beyond long fences, while smoke curled gently from the chimney of a weathered ranch house. Lonely, peaceful, beautiful. Cade dismounted first. Home, he muttered. The word struck him strangely, as if he rarely used it aloud anymore. Lyra climbed down slowly while staring across the valley bathed in sunset light. No cages. No shouting. No chains. Only wind moving through tall grass. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to breathe deeply. The ranch house itself carried signs of long solitude. Dust-covered shelves. Half-repaired tools rested beside doorways. One chair near the fireplace remained untouched beneath a folded blanket, as though nobody had sat there in years. Lyra noticed a faded child's wooden horse resting on the mantel. Cade noticed her looking. For a moment his expression hardened painfully. "My daughters," he said quietly. Silence followed. "She died. Years ago." Something old and wounded flickered behind his eyes before disappearing again. Lyra lowered her gaze respectfully. "I'm sorry." Cade nodded once and walked outside before she could see grief settling across his face. Days slowly passed afterward. Then weeks. And the ranch began changing. So did Cade. Lyra filled empty rooms with life little by little. She cleaned dust-covered windows, repaired torn curtains, and laughed softly whenever the horses nudged her pockets searching for apples. Cade found himself listening for her footsteps without realizing it. Sometimes he'd catch her standing in open fields at night staring silently toward the stars above the valley. Homesick, alone, but healing. And though neither spoke much about it, both had stopped feeling quite so lonely. Until the sheriff arrived. His horse thundered into the yard one gray afternoon carrying dust and bad news. Cade stepped onto the porch while Lyra watched nervously from the doorway. Sheriff Boone removed his hat heavily. "You got trouble coming." Cade's expression darkened immediately. "The men from Black Hollow?" Boone nodded. "They're asking questions in every town west of the canyon." His eyes shifted toward Lyra briefly. "And they ain't bounty hunters." "How many?" "At least 8 armed riders." Lyra's face lost color instantly. Boone looked uneasy. "Word is the girl's carrying something valuable. Something tied to those alien ruins." Cade said nothing. The sheriff sighed heavily. "Town council's nervous. Folks think bringing her here's gonna invite bloodshed." "They're probably right," Cade answered calmly. Boone stepped closer. "Then send her away before those men reach this valley." Silence fell. The sheriff waited. But Cade never looked back toward the house. Never reconsidered. Finally Boone muttered, "Damn stubborn fool," before riding away. That night thunder rolled above the valley. Rain hammered against ranch windows while wind rattled the barn doors violently. Lyra couldn't sleep. Fear kept crawling beneath her skin. Near midnight she noticed lanternlight moving outside through the storm. She quietly stepped onto the porch. Across the yard, inside the barn, Cade Mercer was loading rifles. Boxes of ammunition sat open nearby beside sharpened hunting knives and spare revolvers. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat while thunder growled overhead. Lyra stared at him in silence. Because she finally understood. The scarred rancher already knew blood was coming. And he intended to stand between her and it anyway. The storm broke just before dawn. Dark clouds rolled low across the valley while cold wind bent the grass in restless waves around Cade Mercer's ranch. Rainwater still dripped from fence posts and barn roofs, but the thunder had passed. Now the silence felt worse. Cade stood on the ranch porch fastening the leather holster around his waist while pale morning light spread slowly across the hills. 2 revolvers rested low against his hips beside a hunting knife worn smooth with age. Inside the house, Lyra watched him quietly. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. Cade checked the chamber of his rifle. "Yes," he said calmly. "I do." She stepped closer. "They'll kill you." "Maybe." The answer hit her harder than fear itself, because he said it without hesitation. Not bravado. Not heroics. Just truth. Cade finally looked at her then, and for the first time since she met him, something unguarded showed behind his eyes. "I won't let them drag you back." Lyra's throat tightened painfully. Nobody had ever chosen her over their own safety before. Outside, horses suddenly whinnied in alarm. Cade turned instantly toward the valley ridge. Riders. 8 of them. Dark shapes emerging through the morning fog with rifles across their saddles. The smugglers had arrived. Dust rose behind them as they thundered down the hillside toward the ranch house. Lyra felt terror claw through her chest. One of the riders moved ahead of the others, a broad man with a scarred beard and black duster coat. The same man she had seen near the saloon in Black Hollow. His horse stopped near the front gate. The others spread out slowly around the property. Predators circling prey. "Morning, Mercer," the leader shouted. Cade stepped off the porch into the muddy yard with rifle in hand. "What do you want?" The man grinned coldly. "You got something belongs to us." Lyra froze inside the doorway. The rider spotted her immediately. "There she is." His smile widened. "Now listen careful, rancher. Hand the girl over, and maybe we leave your place standing." Cade's face never changed. "She ain't property." Several smugglers laughed darkly. The leader's expression hardened. "You don't understand what she is." "No," Cade replied. "I understand exactly what you are." Silence followed. Then the leader slowly reached for his revolver. The valley exploded into violence. Gunfire cracked across the ranch like thunder. Cade fired first. One smuggler flew backward off his horse before the others even reacted. Horses screamed and scattered through the muddy yard while bullets tore through fence rails and shattered windows. Lyra stumbled backward inside as splinters exploded from the doorway beside her head. Outside, Cade moved with terrifying precision. Not wild shooting. Not panic. Experience. Years of violence lived inside every movement. He fired once. Twice. Another rider crashed into the dirt. The remaining smugglers spread toward the barn and corrals, using wagons and fences as cover while bullets ripped through rain-soaked wood. Smoke filled the cold air. Lyra covered her mouth in horror. She had seen men fight before. But Cade fought like someone who already made peace with dying long ago. A bullet tore across his shoulder. He barely flinched. Another smuggler charged the porch with a shotgun. Cade drew his revolver so fast it looked unreal. One shot. The attacker collapsed instantly. But there were too many. More riders pushed toward the house from both sides now. Lyra's breathing quickened desperately. If Cade fell, they would take her alive again. And this time they would never let her escape. Suddenly her eyes drifted toward the cellar door beneath the kitchen stairs. A memory surfaced. Her father's voice. The hidden signal. The emergency beacon salvaged from the crashed colony ship years ago. The smugglers had searched for it endlessly. Because the device did more than reveal map. It called home. Lyra turned and ran downstairs. Above her, gunfire continued shaking the ranch. Dust rained from ceiling beams while shouting echoed outside. She reached the cellar floor and tore aside old blankets covering a rusted metal crate hidden in darkness. Her trembling hands opened it. Inside rested a strange silver device no larger than a lantern. Cold blue symbols flickered faintly across its surface. Still alive. Lyra's breath caught. She hadn't touched alien technology since childhood. Another gunshot thundered overhead. Cade shouted outside in pain. Lyra activated the device. For one terrifying second nothing happened. Then brilliant blue light burst upward through the cellar windows. The entire ranch glowed. Outside every rider froze. The smugglers stared toward the house in horror. "What the hell is that?" one yelled. The leader's face drained pale instantly. "No," he whispered. The signal shot skyward like a burning star through the storm clouds above the valley. Then the earth began trembling. Everyone looked upward. At first there was only thunder. Then shadows. Massive shadows moving behind the clouds. The smugglers panicked immediately. "Horses!" someone screamed. The clouds split apart. Enormous silver ships descended silently from the sky above the frontier valley. Not crashing. Arriving. Sunlight reflected across smooth, alien metal as glowing engines illuminated the hills below in pale blue light. The ranch, the fields, the terrified riders, everything bathed beneath the impossible glow. Black Hollow had never seen anything like it. Neither had Cade. The smugglers began fleeing instantly. But beams of light swept down from the hovering ships, surrounding the riders before they escaped. Weapons dropped from trembling hands as armored alien warriors descended gracefully into the valley. Not monsters. Not invaders. People. Tall figures wearing silver armor marked with glowing symbols. One approached slowly through the muddy yard, while the others secured the smugglers without firing a single shot. The leader removed her helmet. She looked toward Lyra standing on the porch, and smiled softly. "Navigator child," she whispered emotionally. Lyra nearly collapsed with relief. Cade lowered his rifle carefully, still breathing hard from the fight. Blood soaked his sleeve from the wound in his shoulder. The alien commander turned toward him next. "You protected her." Cade shrugged weakly. "Someone had to." The commander studied him with visible surprise. Then she looked toward the captured smugglers. "They hunted our survivors for years," she explained quietly. "Your world feared what it did not understand." Lyra stepped beside Cade carefully. "They wanted the memory map," she told him softly. "The location of our remaining colonies." Cade nodded once. Everything finally made sense. Within hours the valley filled with stunned townspeople arriving from Black Hollow after witnessing the ships descending from the sky. Men who once mocked Lyra now stared speechlessly at the advanced technology restoring broken fences and healing wounded horses with glowing medical instruments. Even Sheriff Boone removed his hat in disbelief. The alien commander eventually approached Lyra one final time near sunset. "Our people are rebuilding," she said gently. "You can come home now." Lyra looked toward the glowing ships waiting across the valley. Then toward Cade. He stood near the porch quietly watching the hills, shoulders tired beneath fading sunlight. Alone again. Unless she changed that. The commander noticed her expression immediately. "You wish to stay." It wasn't a question. Lyra smiled faintly through gathering tears. "This already feels like home." Cade turned toward her in surprise. "You sure about that?" he asked softly. Lyra stepped closer. "When everyone else looked at me," her voice trembled slightly, "they saw something unwanted." She looked directly into his scarred eyes. "You didn't." Silence settled gently between them while golden sunset light spread across the valley. Then, for the first time in years, Cade Mercer smiled. Not the guarded half-smirks he gave strangers. A real smile. Small. Honest. Healing. Weeks later, Black Hollow barely resembled the dying frontier town it once was. Alien engineers restored clean water systems beneath the earth while new technology healed drought-stricken farmland across the territory. And the people who once feared Lyra now greeted her warmly whenever she rode into town beside the scarred rancher. But the happiest place in the valley remained the quiet ranch beyond the dust. Because every evening, beneath golden skies and endless stars, a lonely broken rancher and the girl nobody wanted finally sat beside the porch together. And neither of them had to feel alone anymore.